head spinning on my shoulders.
Hello and welcome back to another video. Once again, we're going to be looking at the BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K. So long I almost forgot its name again. I was going to call it the Pocket 4K from now on. Going to assume everyone's going to know that I'm talking about the BlackMagic camera. Anyway, let's jump in. Okay, so my first impressions of this camera. I have now used this camera for a shoot, so I am well aware of its pitfalls, what it does well. Let's start off with the actual body itself. The camera itself feels weighty. There's a really good weight to it. It doesn't feel cheap. It's made of plastic, but at the same time, it doesn't feel like a very cheap camera. It doesn't feel like you're playing with one of like a cheaper Canon camera, like one of their entry-level cameras or something like that. It feels like a really solid camera. It feels good in the hand. It's got good weight. It is a bit large. To be still called the pocket camera with the size it is now is a bit like, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's smaller than, you know, like a Red Rig, when it's smaller than like an Arri or the Ursa Mini, you know, but at the same time it's still not the size of what the original Pocket was. So it does feature 15 buttons. You have a dedicated ISO button, shutter button, white balance button. Obviously you have your quick dial, which by default controls the iris until you then go into one of the other menus. You've got 2 record buttons, 3 custom function buttons. I'll do another video on what I have that set up as at a later date. You have the on-off button, you have the play button so you can look back, you have a menu button, you have an autofocus button, an iris button, you have a zoom in button, and what's the last one? A high frame rate button, so a button dedicated to high frame rate modes. So the ports on this camera, you've got a 12 volt in, you've got a USB-C, which can be used for power, but most of the time you will be using this for something like one of the Samsung T5 SSDs. You have a mic in jack, you have a headphone jack, which is super handy. I've used this now and I can confirm, so handy having this, because it means that you can really check whether or not your microphone's working properly. Finally, a full-size HDMI cable. I can't begin to tell you how useful that is. My M50, this one up here behind me, that has a micro HDMI cable, so not even a mini, and those things are super flimsy. When I have that plugged into an external monitor, even on a tripod, the slightest kick of the tripod will wobble it and it's all janky, and stay away from those, stop using them. Mini HDMI at the absolute smallest. But yeah, so HDMI is great. Okay, so next up, let's have a look at the inbuilt screen. So we do have a 5-inch screen on the camera itself. I can't begin to tell you how nice it is to be able to see that much detail that clearly. It is lacking a little bit in the brightness. When I was filming outside, I could barely see anything. I'd need to put my hand over the top of the monitor so I could actually even begin to see what I was looking at. As you've probably heard from this camera as well, the screen does not articulate. For instance, right now, I don't have an external screen hooked up. I've checked to make sure I'm in focus. I've had to check the exposure and everything. I can't monitor that, so I'll need to get an external monitor to go with this camera. But again, that's something that I knew beforehand, is it wasn't articulating, and you do kind of need to build this camera out for it to be as useful as it needs to be. Okay, so next up, let's talk about the software. So the software on this camera is unlike any other camera I've ever used. The menus are super easy to navigate, whether that's because of 5-inch screen or whether or not that is because of the actual way the menus are laid out. But it's super intuitive to use. Without even using the manual, I figured out where everything was pretty much straight away when I got the camera. Inside the software, you have your zebra, your focus assist, your frame guides, your grids, your safe area, and your false color. Now, I've never used false color before, so go and look up a video on exactly how it works, and I've got to say, how have I never had this before? Because it's super useful. I recommend everyone uses it if you don't already. Storage wise, this camera accepts CFast 2.0. It accepts, as I said, SSDs via USB-C, but also it does accept SD cards. So I've been using the SD card slot most of the time, but I've also used the SSD. I used this for a wedding last weekend, and I used the SD card. I've got 256 gigabyte SanDisk Extreme Pro SD card, records at 170 megabytes a second, so it can handle full resolution, so 4K DCI in BlackMagic RAW, 3:1 footage just fine, but it won't handle Q0 footage because that records something like 230 megabytes a second. So it'll be too fast for that, but it'll be fine on the SSD. Do plan on moving to having a CFast card as well, although I'll be mostly using the SSD. the ability to have both the CFast, the SD card and the SSD at my disposal will really allow me to not even worry about footage. I mean, I filmed for a full day and didn't fill up a 256GB SD card. Problem with SD cards is they can be less reliable than a CFast card and less reliable than an SSD. With that logic, I kind of want to get the CFast card and be using that as the bare minimum. First impressions on the footage that comes out the camera, I've got to say, being able to record in RAW for the first time is amazing. The files are quite large. I've had to use DaVinci Resolve to be able to edit them because Premiere Pro at this time doesn't have that support. I found DaVinci Resolve super intuitive to use. I've been using it for maybe 10 hours now, so not even that much time, and I've already figured out how to do most of the things I already knew how to do in Adobe Premiere Pro, but I haven't set up my keybinds on my software yet, so I haven't really kind of nailed that workflow yet. However, I do have to say the actual footage itself, when it comes out flat, as soon as you drop a LUT onto it, it looks great. Like BlackMagic Pocket Cinema Camera 4K, I think it's film to extended video or film to extended video. That for me looks really good, and I've recorded everything in 4K because although I'll be exporting at 1080p, it's going to allow me to crop in a bit more, do some in the box panning, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, the actual footage you get out of this camera is definitely worth the price that you pay for the camera, as well as building up the rest of those items that go along with it. I will say I've been using the EF-S 18-135 lens that I've been using for ages now. So it's a relatively old lens, it's pretty beat up, it rattles quite a lot. I'm definitely due an upgrade. I've been using that with the Viltrox EF-M2 Mark II speed booster, which is review coming soon, you'll find out. And I mean, it's done me fine. I can't really complain for the price. All in all, I've got to say, even when you whack that 50mm, you know, that nifty 50, when you whack that onto this camera, footage is phenomenal. You get some really nice bokeh, really crisp shots, and having focus assist maximum is amazing. That's it for this video. Like I said, more on the speed booster in the next one. Now, like this if you liked it, get subscribed, like the bell if you want to stay up to date every time I release a new video, and I will see you in the next one.